Okay, folks, let's get into the last unit of the program, which is the sustainability unit. Um, so, workshop 13 or session 13, uh, unit BSBSUS210 or 201, I should say. Participate in environmentally sustainable work practices. Um, so, this is a relatively new unit in the training package. It's a level 2 unit, so technically speaking, it's a lot lighter than the other units within the qualification. It's only a short unit, so we should be able to smash through this one pretty quickly. Nice way to end the qualification. Okay, so three outcomes: identify current resource usage, comply with environmental regulations, and seek opportunities to improve resource efficiency. So that last um, point there falls in line with the previous unit we just have completed, which is a continuous improvement unit. So undertaking those principles of tweaking. Uh, the second point there is around regulation. There's two key bits of legislation which I'll talk about, and really at this level it's just an awareness of that regulation, not necessarily being able to understand it fully. And the first one, which is just making sure that we've got an awareness of the resources that we're using. So let's just break down this idea of sustainability. What does that mean? Well, sustainability refers to the capacity of any business, be it private or public, to keep going, to do what it's always been doing or what it generally does, without depleting resources required. So traditionally, we always think about that in terms of physical resources. So when we think about sustainability from a traditional perspective, we always think, most commonly, we think about the environment, but it's not just about the environment. Sustainability also refers to the economic viability. What does that mean? The profitability of the organization. So when we talk about it's got to be sustainable for the business, it means not only does it have to be good for the environment, but it also has to make sure that we don't lose money, so that we can maintain the profitability, maintain people in jobs, that type of thinking. And the third one is social responsibility. Sustainability also covers off the idea that we have to be ethical in the way that we approach things. So it looks after our community. Um, so if you look at a controversial, let's have a look at fracking. Fracking is a controversial activity. Um, if if you were a government body, say a local government body working with with um, gas companies undertaking fracking, part of your sustainability assessment would be its impact on the environment, its economic viability in terms of the operations that are being proposed, but also about how it impacts the community. So things like public health, um, things like tourism, impact on tourism, so forth. All those type of social impacts. That's an example of that. So when we think about sustainability, we're really thinking about those three dimensions. Typical sustainability practices. So in an organization, the typical things that people are doing around sustainability are things like just making sure that we're using environmentally friendly supplies. So for example, recycled copy paper, or working with suppliers who are environmentally certified. In terms of so the ACT government have a scheme that allows to go around local businesses, have a look at your environmental impacts, and then if you have a good policy and you're having some good processes in place, they'll give you a form of accreditation that then we can take as suppliers to another business. Say, look, we're actually trying to do some good stuff, and then our clients go, yeah, okay, that sounds good. We'd like to work with you because you're obviously sustainable. It can include things like carpooling, for example, to reduce the amount of cars on the road, reduce emissions, and reduce congestion. Encouraging the use of video conferencing as an alternative to flying to meetings. Planes are one of the greatest carbon emitters. So lots of organisations are trying to um, get people into VC video conference instead of face to face. Not only is it good for the environment, it also it's cost effective, so it ticks off a couple of boxes. Using green energy sources, looking for alternatives as an energy source. Lots of organizations are trying to tap into the renewables as an energy source instead of your more traditional sources. And managing the triple bottom line, the things I talked about, the financial, the social, and the environmental, risks, obligations, and opportunities. Because with risks, it's not only negative impact. Sometimes it can create opportunities. So, for example, switching from a dirty energy source to a clean energy source, you might use that as an opportunity to market to market your business to your supplier, not to your suppliers, to your clients, to try and use that as a marketing edge. None of the other suppliers, we're a supplier. None of the other suppliers have a green thumb approach. We do, so you should deal with us if you're like-minded. So you can look at it as an opportunity as well. And just things like reducing waste. Basic things like splitting your garbage between non-recyclables and recyclables. So let's do a couple of activities to kick off. What does the term sustainability refer to? So I've given you a pretty good reference of that, and just make sure that you think about the three impacts of the environmental, the economic, and the social responsibility, which then flows on to the next one. What are the three key areas? Environment, economic, and social responsibility. Identify and list 5 practices that organizations are adopting to improve their sustainability. So you can think of things such as using recycled paper, double-sided printing, switching off lights, splitting your waste. All these are really practical. Carpooling, making sure that some organizations have a minimum of 2 people per vehicle, policy wherever possible. So just some of these are very pragmatic day-to-day things that you're doing that have a positive impact on the sustainability of the business. And just to link it back, that point I made before, sustainability is part of this continuous improvement push. It's you're constantly looking at what we're doing and saying, can we do that better? Can we do that better? Can we reduce our carbon footprint? Can we reduce a little bit more? Can we reduce a little bit more? Sustainability is about using resources efficiently and producing the least amount of waste pollution as possible. And if we apply that continuous improvement methodology to it, and we measure, and we look at what we're using, and we track it, and we look for improvements, we can strive towards reducing that. Okay, we're currently using X amount of reams of paper. Let's go double-sided. Let's ask people to be considerate before they print. Let's measure that. Let's see what the improvement is, and we can track whether we're actually reducing the amount of paper, and that's a good thing. And then we go, okay, we'll reduce it down to this. What else can we do? Okay, can we maybe reduce the amount of printers to get people to really think about whether they need to be printing that, and so forth and so forth. So set benchmarks, assess performance, and look for opportunities to continually improve. And of course, importantly, as we talked about with the continuous improvement unit last time, is to record. So making sure that we do capture the data, and that could be a checklist, like a sheet with dates, amount used here, amount used then, and looking for variance. It can be log sheets where every time we open up a new ream of paper, we put it into the log. Can be spreadsheets, so put it into a Microsoft Excel and we put data in there, and it can work out for us what we're using and whether it's an increase or decrease. It can put in charts for us and so forth. Databases, schedules, there's a whole range of tools that we can use to record and track our resource usage. And organizations will have sustainable plans, like a sustainable policy and plans to support that, such as some of the examples I've got there. Calculate the resource usage and waste generation for each business activity or area. Discover which business activities areas use the majority of resources, and so forth. And like with many of the other topics that we've discussed, this has to be driven from the ground up. It's, again, if it's just a management initiative, well, it'll increase the likelihood of being unsuccessful. But if it's something that is driven from the ground up, if we as the workers take this on board and work with it and drive it, we increase the likelihood of it being successful. So consultation is important. Having staff meetings, having one-on-one, building committees around looking at areas of sustainability really gets people involved and getting them to participate, and having team meetings, where we can have it as an agenda item to look at, is there any way that we can look at reducing our resource usage? Is there any way that we can look at having a better impact on this, a less of an environmental impact, to encourage people to participate? Because if we're having these consultations, we're having these meetings, these one-on-ones, these committees, we're asking people to participate, we're asking for ideas, we're brainstorming and working through these ideas. Things like asking open questions, things like giving people information so they can make informed decisions. If we're doing that, then people are going to take that on board. They're going to be looking at their work and going, how sustainable is what I'm doing? Is there any way that I can make it more sustainable? And then start to feed up some suggestions. And of course, we want to make sure that if we do get any suggestions, especially if they come by us, that we're providing that positive feedback, that constructive feedback also that we've talked about previously. Just talk about environmental hazards, because it falls under here. So sometimes, especially when we talk about environmental impacts, environmental hazards occur. And this can be things like a chemical leakage or a chemical spill. Or, we've talked about things like disposing of chemicals and so forth. If you ever come across a potential breach of an environmental requirement or standard, that needs to be reported. It needs to be reported to your manager or supervisor or your health and safety officer, or if you've got an environmental officer within the organisation, we've each got a duty of care to report those, because it potentially can breach the legal legislative requirements set up by the legal framework. So we need to make sure that we report that. And the best way to do that is and we talk about this regularly, but the best way to do that is in written form, so that you can demonstrate that you've done that. Pop an email to those people. You can see them and speak to them verbally, but then follow up with an email saying, as discussed, this is a concern I have in regards to the way that this chemical has been disposed, or this incident that occurred today, or whatever the case may be. Activity 2, why should each team member continually identify and assess their resource usage? So this is all about participation and engagement, about us, we're the people at the front line who are doing the job. We know our jobs better. It's easiest for us to know what we're using, how we can be more efficient and so forth. And so therefore we should be having our finger on the pulse. How can team members identify workplace efficiency issues? And for me, the most common or the most common sense approach here is just to say the best way that we can identify workplace issues is to capture data, is to identify a process that we think we can improve and start to record the data so we know what we're actually using, and we can start tweaking things, and then we can have a look at whether we're improving or not. And some of the ways that we can capture that data, so if we're going to 2.3, some of the techniques for recording that data is things like check sheets that I talked about, logs, spreadsheets, databases, all those type of things are really good techniques for capturing data. Let's have a look at scenario 3. Scenario 3, there we go. Jenny has just joined the team as an office assistant. She has noticed that there is less of a focus on sustainability in this workplace as compared to a previous workplace. Three particular things that she has noticed are: one, lights are left on in offices when they are not being used. There is a lot of unnecessary use of the printer paper. For example, she consistently sees paper in the bin with only 1 or 2 lines of printing. Pages are printed one-sided, and just yesterday she saw a bunch of blank paper with creases in the bin. Waste isn't sorted into general waste to landfill or recyclables. Jenny would like to say something to her manager, but understands that she needs to be properly prepared with facts and figures before she does this. Working in groups, or in our case, working on your own, answer the following questions. What data should Jenny collect? And how would you recommend she does that? So think about what I've just been talking about. Current usage. What are some of the ways that she can go about identifying what is currently being used in these specific areas? So if it's paper, how will she get data in terms of what's the current paper usage? Jenny records the amount of copy paper going to waste in the office for 2 weeks and finds that approximately 10,000 sheets of paper per week are going to waste. The office currently purchases copy paper at $24.95 for a box of 2,500 sheets. Reviewing her data collection, Jenny identifies single-sided printing as the greatest cause of waste. She estimates that just from the sample of paper going to waste that she has been tracking, paper usage could be reduced by 25% if double-sided printing were to be the standard. So you can see there that that there's a good opportunity for her for continuous improvement around the area of sustainability. But then how does she get her manager on board? Well, to get her manager on board, she needs to write a pretty persuasive email to say, hey, there's an opportunity here. So have a go at that. So C, as Jenny, write an email to your manager reporting your findings. And if you want to include recommendations in there, so this is what I found. This is the amount of copy paper we're currently using. This is what it's costing us. This is what I think we could save if we were to do this. I just quickly want to talk about sustainable law, we don't want to spend too much here because it's at this unit, at the level of this unit, it's really just an awareness rather than an expertise on it. So, so there's two bits of legislation that are critical. And I'll talk about those shortly. But just to sort of say that environmental law is one of the largest or fastest growing area of the legislative environment at the moment in Australia. And I don't have to tell you guys that because I know that for many of you guys, you're working right at the front line of this. But the regulatory framework around environmental law impacts everybody, pretty much impacts businesses large and small and residents, as you guys would be aware. And there are severe penalties set in for any breaches of that legislation. And all this stuff sort of flows through on from a worker's perspective. It flows through our policies, our procedures, and our job descriptions. In the ACT government, you guys have the Environment Planning Sustainable Development Directorate, and that's the purpose of that directorate is to lead the nation in achieving sustainable outcomes to be a livable and sustainable city, which I think is pretty bloody awesome, to be honest. And that's the website there, and you can see that it actually references here. It references the legislation. So the main legislation that and that's actually had a regular update since then. The Environment Protection Act is the big one, and that's run by the EPA. So here's the two key federal, the Commonwealth legislative tools, and this is the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act of '99, and this is the key piece of legislation for preserving the environment in Australia. And then that's supported by the National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Act, which is, if I go back to this idea about data is critical, not only from a continuous improvement perspective, but from a sustainable, like we're collecting data in all the key areas such as safety, continuous improvement, sustainability, and so forth. So the National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Act is the main implement that's used to ensure that the government has a legal right to be able to get businesses to register and log and report what they're emitting in terms of outputs around greenhouse gases and energy and consumption and so forth. And that allows us to do things such as report our emissions and at an international level. So activity 4, when you identify an environmental hazard, to whom should you report it? We talked about the 3 key areas being your manager, being workplace health and safety, and if you've got an environmental officer, you should also report to them. Pretty important that you do, actually. 4.2, how should breaches of environmental law, regulation, or procedures be reported? And this is, again, a key theme throughout this whole qualification. Anything that's of significance should always be reported in writing. And we've talked about this. I know you guys know this ad nauseum, but it's really about having a footprint and being able to back yourself if you ever need to demonstrate that you've done the right thing, you've complied with the duty of care. You can always grab that email back out and go, here you go. You can see here that I've reported, and if need be, that can be evidence in a court of law. Activity 5, why should each team member have a good understanding of environmental regulations and legislation? Well, we need to know, just like safety, we need to know about the regulations and legislations, because that way we can ensure that we act in a way that's consistent and we don't run the risk of breaching our responsibilities. 3 procedures that ensure compliance with environmental regulations. Can you guys think of any procedures that ensure compliance? So it might be around resource usage. It might be around disposing of dangerous goods. It might be around some of the things I talked about earlier, like carpooling and so forth. Activity 6, under 3 focus areas of minimizing resources or using resources efficiently, reducing toxic materials and hazardous chemical use, and employing lifecycle management approaches. In groups, rotate around each of the focus areas and identify, both at an organization individual level, practices and behaviors that can drive each of these focus areas. You're not going to be able to do that in groups, obviously. Just do that individually. Just a couple of points under each of those things, under each of those headings, things that you can do both as an organization or an individual level to minimize resources or use them efficiently, and that can be things such as start recording on, start to capture and record resources being used. You can even get down to things like double-sided printing of paper, carpooling, all those type of things that we talked about earlier. Reducing toxic materials and hazardous chemical use, and I know we've talked about this previously, but things like looking for more environmental friendly chemicals and suppliers. So those type of things can help in reducing toxic materials, and looking for alternatives that aren't as toxic, which is something that a lot of businesses do. Employing lifecycle management approaches. So I just want to briefly talk about this because I haven't mentioned this, haven't had the opportunity to mention it yet. Life cycle management approaches are about, are about understanding the, let me just get up, because I know you guys are just hanging out for me to draw something. If I go back to, what was I talking about before the toasters? Let's talk about our smartphones. Hang on, wrong slide. There we go. Let's talk about our man, my tool's not working. That sucks. Okay, so let's talk about, let's do the Apple. So it's a bit laggy like I am right now. let's talk about Apple phones. And this is the supply chain, just like we talked about with the toaster last session. But this time, just want to talk about and I've got an Apple iPhone, so I'm not throwing shade on them just because I don't like them. It's just to use them as an example. All right, let's just look at 4 parts so far. This is how does the Apple iPhone work? Well, back in the US, in Silicon Valley somewhere, there's a design team. So sitting in their nice, flashy offices, they designed the iPhone, and they send the design of the phone off to China, and in China they source the materials, and then in China, and I'm only assuming this, I mean those materials could come from all over the world, but then they manufacture it. And then they and we'll just say China again, they transport it or ship it back to, they ship it all over the world for sell, and then they get sold all over the world. They're sold, and then here is they go to waste when they're disposed of, when the new one comes out. So when we talk about life cycle, we're really actually talking about from cradle to the grave of products. And you can do it with services, but I just want to use it with products at this stage. So if we're talking about, so if you're Apple, and this, I'm going to just put down the Apple phone or the iPhone. If you're these guys, you have to think about sustainability at each of these points, because you own it. Even though this is outsourced, this is to some other company, not called Apple, you're outsourcing that, you still have responsibility for the sustainability of that. And this is what I was talking about before with suppliers and being able to show that you're environmentally friendly and so forth. So if we think about life cycle management principles and considerations, we need to make sure that that we think about the sustainability of our products and services. Are they ethically being designed? Are the materials that we're being used, are they sustainable? Are our practices ethical? Are they socially responsible, and so forth? But then we also think about here. Once we sell it, so it's sold here, we don't. It's not that we no longer have responsibility for it. We still have responsibility when this product needs to be disposed of. So even though it's in some landfill pit, it's still our responsibility. So if we think about proper sustainability and life cycle management, we have to think about, how do we get these, once people update their iPhones, how do we get them back so that we can recycle them and we can start back into here, so that we're continuously trying to use it. A bit like, when we talk about renewable energies and trying to get stuff that just continually recycles. So just to illustrate, and again, I've got an iPhone. I'm not throwing shade on Apple. I think they're awesome, but just to use as an example, because it's a real challenge and dilemma for many organizations. Okay, where are we at? Alright. So have a go at activity 6 and see how you go with that. And then the final project. You've just joined the team amongst many other things as the sustainability officer. Let me just get this up. You've just joined the team as, amongst other things, the environmental sustainability officer. Your role is to reduce the environment footprint of this site. Your area of focus are emissions from vehicles used, electricity usage at the site, waste to landfill from site and its operations. Pardon me. Again, just on your own, pick one of these focus areas and using a continuous improvement to improve sustainability. Just outline, just in the outline how you would handle it. So if it's emissions from vehicle usage, is to say, so the way I might do this is say, identify all the vehicles that we use at the depot. Now, this is work vehicles, not personal vehicles. At our depot, identify the vehicles, look at the current usage, how much mileage they're doing in a week cycle, for example, a typical week. Then have a talk with the team about how we can reduce the amount of mileage that we do on these vehicles. Come up with things such as, team rides, about, and you guys will probably, no doubt you guys are already doing this, planning how these vehicles are used so that they don't have to keep going back and forth, that, you can do one trip and cover off a number of maybe drop-offs and stuff like that. So you identify an area, you gather your data, you consult with the team about how we can improve it, you put some things into action, you track the data again. So you might say, okay, well, let's try a couple of these things. Let's try it for a week and let's see how much mileage we get, and we get the data with the new changes, and then we make decisions as a result of that. And it's just that's what I'm looking for, is just some points like that to sort of say how you would handle it, how you would approach it. So you can do things like vehicles, or you can do electricity, and that can be grabbing the bill for, if you can get access to the electricity bill for a depot. You might do that. We would have a look at the electricity bill again, call a meeting with all people at the depot, talk about what we're trying to do, why it's important, ask for suggestions and ideas on how we can reduce the amount of electricity being used, implement, discuss those ideas, pick the best ones, implement some of those ideas, and then track it when you get your next bill, compare it, and it might be, like in this case, a 12-month cycle. Compare the bill and see if it's made a positive impact. So that's pretty much what I'm looking for here. Just some nice basic points to show that you're applying that continuous improvement methodology. And then that's it, guys. So they're the 3 outcomes: identify current resource usage, comply with environmental regulations, seek opportunities to improve resource efficiency. Woohoo! And that's the last unit in the program. So at this stage, if you've completed this unit, congratulations and well done. Hopefully this whole thing will blow over sooner rather than later, and we can get an opportunity to touch base before the end of the program. If not, and this is the last time that you hear my dulcet tones, I just want to say thank you very much. It's been pretty bloody awesome up until March, which is where we are now for me. It's been pretty bloody awesome. It's a real shame, and it's really regretful that we didn't have the opportunity to finish the workshop through the face-to-face workshop sessions as we were, but these things are out of our control. But it's been really awesome, guys. You've been terrific, a real treat, and well done on your great work. Up until this point, it's been really terrific, and I've really enjoyed our discussions and working through all the different scenarios and challenges of the qualification. It's been really good. So thank you very much. Congratulations, and hope I catch up with you again in the future, but all the best nevertheless. Cheers.